This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at Kova Software, the #1 dispensary point-of-sale system in North America, with an average of nearly 100 new dispensary clients opening their doors every month. Some of the biggest retail brands and most remote cannabis stores in the US and Canada count on Kova. Swing over to kovasoftware.com today to see why. That's kovasoftware.com, with Kova spelled C-O-V-A. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Friday, April 16th, 2021, and you're tuned in to episode 1048 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. We start off today's news in Alabama, where a bill to set up a limited medical marijuana law was approved out of a final House committee yesterday, sending it on to the full House for a vote there. The legislation, Senate Bill 46, if turned into law, would allow people living with one of 20 qualifying conditions to access medical cannabis products through dispensaries. Representatives made a number of changes to SB 46 while it was in their hands, so the bill will have to swing back over to the Senate for another vote there should it make it out of the House. One of the things I wonder about with this bill is just how restrictive it is. As it stands now, SB 46 would allow qualifying patients to purchase, quote, 70 daily dosages of medical cannabis, unquote, with a daily dose considered to be 50 milligrams of THC. In case you're not familiar with your milligrams of THC, 50 is not many. There are plenty of medical patients who require upwards of a few thousand milligrams of THC per day, and most regular consumers of cannabis would hardly even notice 50 milligrams of THC. So it sounds right now like we shouldn't expect much from Alabama's program as designed. It's still important to get that baby step in, as we're talking about Alabama here. But as they like to say, the devil is in the details. Pop over to Kyle Yeager's piece on this one if you need more. Yesterday in Idaho, Republican lawmakers failed in their bid to legislatively block any future changes to the state's regressive prohibitionary drug laws. We hit on this storyline when it first popped up, as Republican lawmakers sought to place a citizens' initiative on the 2020 ballot banning the legalization of marijuana and psychedelics. Yesterday, Idaho lawmakers voted on the bill to push that ballot measure, and thankfully it failed, falling short of the two-thirds margin required by a count of 42 to 28, with a number of conservative lawmakers joining in with Democrats in voting it down, with many of those citing personal experiences with the use of medical cannabis by themselves or family. We end the day's dip into the top headlines with a great story finding that 69% of Americans now favor making adult use marijuana legal. Nice. The all-time high levels of support now include a healthy 62% of Republicans, and for the first time ever, more than half of all seniors. As Kyle Yeager has it over at Marijuana Moments, the levels of support for adult use marijuana are now 18% higher than they were just 9 years ago. And to date myself a little bit here, around 25% of the nation was in favor of adult use legal cannabis when I got started in the movement in the late 90s. So the overall change in societal acceptance is just stunning. Whatever you're all doing out there, keep that shit up because it's working. Those are the top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, Kova Software, the #1 dispensary point-of-sale system in North America, with an average of nearly 100 new dispensary clients opening their doors every month. Some of the biggest retail brands and most remote cannabis stores in the US and Canada count on Kova. Kova Software is easy to use and it's fully compliant with all the right rules and regulations, so you can be assured that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. One of the things that dispensary owners really appreciate about Kova Software, especially in today's fast-moving industry, is its ability to scale, because it's a great piece of software no matter if you're using it on one store or 100. That makes your life as a business owner easier because you don't have to worry about the hassles of transitioning from one point-of-sale system to another as you grow. And because Kova Software is so easy to use, you'll spend a lot less time getting you and your staff caught up to speed on how to operate. Pop over to kovasoftware.com with Kova spelled C-O-V-A to learn about these and all the other benefits of being a Kova client. That's kovasoftware.com. All right, time for the Blitz. Oregon's Willamette Week has a good story up that's a good reminder of how hard it can be to operate within the legal cannabis industry. As writer Sophie Peel details the saga of marijuana dispensary owner Sally Bishop, who has been turned away twice now when trying to pay her dispensary's electricity bill at Fred Meyer grocery stores, which offers the service to its customers to pay a number of utility-type bills. Like many within the legal cannabis industry, Ms. Bishop has to deal with a lot of cash in her day-to-day operations, since her ability to access traditional business banking services is hindered by federal banking restrictions, and she had taken to paying her electricity bill using cash at her local Fred Meyer. But lately, she's been turned away, and a Fred Meyer spokesperson confirmed that the grocery store chain won't be able to process payments like that from marijuana companies, which is super lame. Gaspard Ledem over at the Outlaw Report picked up on an interesting story out of Washington, D.C., as the city's Alcoholic Beverage Regulation Administration, or ABRA, proposed a set of rule changes that would allow medical cannabis dispensaries to hold educational events for their patients, including things like classes on how to best consume cannabis and the ways to cook with it. The ABRA will be holding a public hearing on the proposed changes at the end of this month. The multi-state cannabis operator Tilt Holdings just released its Q4 and full-year fiscal report for the year 2020. For Q4, Tilt banked $42.3 million in revenue, up 8.1% sequentially and 35.4% annually, with a positive adjusted EBITDA of $4.5 million and a reported working capital of $57.4 million. For the full year of 2020, Tilt had $158.4 million in revenue, up from $146 million in 2019, and an adjusted EBITDA of positive $16.9 million. Swing over to New Cannabis Ventures for more details and numbers there. A new study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that psilocybin was just as effective in treating depression as a traditional selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or SSRI drug. The small study had a total of 59 patients, with 30 of them receiving psilocybin and the other 29 getting a traditional SSRI drug. I'm far from being able to parse into the actual particulars of the results, but it does seem to indicate that psilocybin as a treatment for depression is worthy of a lot more study. There's an interesting story over at Crane's New York Business that looks at how the cannabis rivalry between New York and New Jersey might play out, with both states in the process of throwing off cannabis prohibition. There's a lot of demand in the two states for legal marijuana, with giant populations of people in both, but with each taking different regulatory routes to legal sales, there is bound to be a lot of interesting things to pick up on as time rolls by. One thing that we could potentially see is supply disparities, as New York State has no caps on licensed cultivators, while New Jersey is limiting its numbers to 37. I would have this general storyline on your news radar, even if you don't do business in either state. Kyle Yeager has another story up about a southern state potentially legalizing medical cannabis. This time we have a proposed bill in Tennessee advancing this week to the full Senate that would create a limited medical marijuana program. And I do mean limited here. If passed and made into law, the proposed measure would allow people with one of 11 qualifying medical conditions the right to buy a limited number of products from dispensaries, except the bill doesn't actually allow for the opening of dispensaries. So as Kyle astutely points out, the legislation would protect a very limited number of people traveling through Tennessee with their out-of-state cannabis, while also giving some leeway to state residents to similarly bring products in from outside, though technically that's against federal law. So, yeah. Our final story in the day sadly revisits a headline from earlier this week, with our very own Chris Crane writing over at Forbes about the many contributions made to our industry by activist Steve Fox, who passed away on Monday at the age of 53. Chris does an excellent job of getting into the details of the main things that Steve did for the world of legal cannabis, including drafting the original language of Colorado's Proposition 64. Beyond that, Steve was also a founder of the National Cannabis Industry Association, the Cannabis Trade Federation and the Safer Alternatives for Enjoyable Recreation, the group he started after he noticed that polling indicated a connection between thinking marijuana was safer than alcohol and in being in favor of legalization. It's hard to overstate the value of that single insight, as you could argue it led to Colorado successfully embracing adult use legalization in 2014. Steve was a published author, a genius marketer, and just about the most humble guy around because he never talked about all the amazing work he did. He just kept pushing for more. If you've not yet already, open up Chris's story here to read all the rest. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again on Tuesday with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, MJ Today Media, and to our awesome Patreon listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the Patreon listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.